Hello and welcome back to House Taken Over. Let's read section or part 2 of House Taken Over. Yesterday we read the first half. Today I'm going to read the second half. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. You're going to take annotations, notes. You're going to quote. You're going to give me 4 quotes dealing with fear, and you're going to annotate each one of those quotes. So let's do it. We left off yesterday at the beginning of paragraph 6. Today is probably going to be one of the last days that I'm going to type in every one of the quotes and annotations. Instead, what I'll probably do, just to save time, is just do the first one and ask you to do the rest by yourselves. But today you will still watch me do it because it's still the beginning of the year and I want you to see exactly how I do this. So let me get my tab ready. Annotations number 2, it should be blank. Let's see, House Taken Over, annotations number 2, there it is. Fabulous. And we are going to once again look for 4 quotes about fear, and then we will annotate each of those quotes. Notice I have a quote starter for each quote, something like consider the following quote, or this is evident in the following quote. And notice each annotation always starts off with this quote clearly shows, so that way you're explaining the annotation. And of course, it's going to say something like this quote clearly shows how fear affects him negatively, or how he does something stupid because of that fear, something like that. So let's go. Paragraph 6. I'll always have a clear memory of it because it happens so simply and without fuss. Okay, a clear memory of what? What is he referring to? Possibly something happened, something haunted happened, or something like that. You can put that down as a quote. I'm choosing not to. Let's continue. Irene was knitting in her bedroom. It was at 8 at night, and I suddenly decided to put the water up for mate. I went down the corridor as far as the oak door, which was ajar, then turned into the hall toward the kitchen, when I heard something in the library or the dining room. First of all, I want to point out that the door that they always keep closed is ajar, meaning it is a little bit open. Why? Let's read our next sentence. The sound came through muted and indistinct. A chair being knocked over onto the carpet, or the muffled buzz of a conversation. Wait a minute, stop. So in their house, which is empty except for them, he hears this. A sound came through muted and indistinct. A chair being knocked over to the carpet, or the muffled buzzing of a conversation. So wait a minute, time out. What's making that noise in the other part of the house? What's knocking over chairs? What's talking? Now it clearly seems to me like this house is haunted. So let's get down this quote. Consider the following quote. The sound came through. So let's do this. The sound came through. Muted and indistinct. Comma. A chair being knocked over and onto the carpet, or the muffled buzzing of a conversation. Chair being knocked over onto, make sure when you type these quotes, guys, you gals, you do it correctly. Onto the carpet, or the muffled or the muffled buzzing of a conversation. I'm actually starting to get a little bit nervous reading the story for these people because I know they're the only 2 people in the house. They don't have guests. They've said this already. So who is knocking over chairs in the other side of the house? Who's conversing? Who's having a conversation over there? So at the end of this quote, I close it with quotation marks, of course. I don't put my period. Then I put my parentheses. Let's put the page number today, 39, and then put my period. This quote clearly shows that the house is haunted. What / who or who is knocking over chairs and talking? The idea that there's a conversation too means that there's more than one person or thing in there talking. So this close shows that the house is haunted. What or who is knocking over chairs and talking? I'm just going to say this now. Are there ghosts on the other side of the door? Are they evil? Don't know. Let's continue. I want to know. At the same time, or a second later, I heard at the end of the passage, which led from those two rooms toward the door. I hurled myself, wait a minute, listen to this. At the same time, or a second later, I heard at the end of the passage, which led from those two rooms to the door. So he's just telling us that first he hears it in those rooms back there, and then he hears this noise coming towards the door, towards him. And remember, we just found out that that door is a little bit open. So what do you do if you hear something or someone on the other side of the door coming towards you? Oh yes, you close that door as fast as you can. And that's what he's going to say. I hurled myself against the door before it was too late. And I shut it, leaned on it the weight of my body. Luckily, the key was on our side. Moreover, I ran the great bolt into place just to be safe. So what does he do? He slams the door shut to keep the ghosts, the monsters, whatever it is over there from getting over to his side. So listen, this is a quote right here that's very important. Ready? I hurled myself. I know this takes time, but I'm showing you how to do a quote and a note, guys and gals. I hurled myself against the door. Oh. Before it was too late. And let's turn the page. Shut it. Comma, leaned on it with the weight of my body. Of my body. Luckily, comma, the key was on our side. What would have happened if the key was on the other side, ladies and gentlemen? He couldn't have locked the door. What if he had to stand there and hold the door closed for eternity until whatever it was got into his side? Luckily, the key was on our side. Semicolon. Moreover, comma, I ran the great bolt into place. Comma, just to be safe. All right, no period here, guys and gals. Close my quotation marks. Then space, then my parentheses, then our page number to show where I took this quote from. This one actually came from two different pages, 39 and 40. This is an interesting one. I'm going to do 39-40 to show that it came from both of those pages. Then I put my period at the end. All right, what does this quote clearly show? What does this quote clearly show? This is a really important quote. Look at it again. I hurled myself against the door before it was too late and shut it. Leaned on it with the weight of my body. Luckily, the key was on our side. Moreover, I ran the great bolt into place just to be safe. This quote clearly shows there is something on the other side of the house. And it is trying to get to their side. The main character, comma, in his fear, closes and locks the door just in time. Now, let me ask you guys something, guys and gals. If this was you, if this was happening in your house, at this point, what do you do? You've now got the door closed, the monster, the ghost, whatever it is on the other side. What do? You leave the house. You just go. But again, they don't. Listen to what he says. This gets a little bit weirder. I went down to the kitchen. I heated the kettle and I got back to the tray of mate. I told Irene I had to shut the back door to the passage. They've taken over the back part. She let her knitting fall. Wait a minute. They've taken over the back part? Who is they? Let's get this down. This is a good one. Consider the following quote, quotation marks. I had to shut the door to the passage. Period. They've taken over. They've taken over the back part. Period. No period. Ha. Close your quotation marks. Put my parentheses. Put my page number. This is 40. Then my period. Okay. What does this quote clearly shows? I had to shut the door to the passage. They've taken over the back part. This quote clearly shows The house is haunted. And the main characters know it. And for some reason, for some crazy reason, they stay in the haunted house. Oh my gosh. Would you stay in a house that you knew there was something on the other side of the house making crazy noises and whatnot? I would freak out. Has anybody ever had like a mouse or something in the walls of their house? It's scary. I mean, it could be a wild animal. It could be an intruder. That's not talking supernatural or scary. But I think for this, they think it's something scary in there. Let's continue. She let the knitting fall and looked at me with her tired, serious eyes. You're sure? I nodded. In that case, she said, picking up the needles again, we'll have to live on this side. I sipped at the mate very carefully, but she took her time starting her work again. I remember it was a gray vest she was knitting. I liked that vest. So they now know, and she says, instead of saying, oh my God, let's get out, let's move, what are we going to do, call somebody? She says, I guess we're just not going to have to go on that side of the house again. That's insane. Let's continue. The first few days were painful since we both left so many things in that part that had been taken over. My collection of French literature, for example, was still in the library. Irene had left several folios of stationery and a pair of slippers that she used a lot in the winter. So not only did they shut off half of their house, but they've left all the stuff that they use in that half of the house. And they're never going to get it again because they're too afraid to go back in there. I missed my briar pipe, and Irene, I think, regretted the loss of her ancient bottles of hesperidin. It happened repeatedly, but only in the first few days, that we would close some drawer or cabinet and look at one another sadly. It's not here. One thing more among the many lost on the other side of the house. But there were advantages too. The cleaning was so much simplified that even when we got up late, 9:30 for instance, by 11 we were sitting around with our arms folded. So they're saying to themselves, well, this is actually better because now we don't have to clean that half of the house. That's insane. Irene got into the habit of coming to the kitchen with me to help me get lunch. We thought about it and decided on this. While I prepared the lunch, Irene would cook up dishes that could be eaten in the evening. We were happy with the arrangement because it was always such a bother to have to leave our bedrooms in the evening and to start to cook. Now we made do with the table in Irene's room and platters of cold supper. Wow. So now it even jams up their daily life because that part of the house is what they would use. I mean, OMG that they're staying. Since it left her more time for knitting, Irene was content. I was a little lost without my books, but so as not to inflict myself on my sister, I set about reordering Papa's stamp collection. That killed some time. We amused ourselves sufficiently, each with his own thing, almost always getting together in Irene's bedroom, which was the more comfortable. Every once in a while, Irene might say, look at this pattern I just figured out. Doesn't it look like clover? After a bit, it was I, pushing a small square of paper in front of her so that she could see the excellence of some stamp or another from Yupon et Malmedy. We were fine, and little by little we stopped thinking. You can live without thinking. OMG, why do they stop thinking? Because thinking brings them what? It brings them fear. That's a great quote. I'm not putting it in because I only have room for one more quote, but if you have room, pop that quote in there. Listen, we were fine, and little by little, we stopped thinking. You can live without thinking. Why? What are they afraid to think about? They're afraid to think about the nightmares on the other side of the door, the monsters. That shows how afraid they are. By the way, that's something that fear can cause people to do. Sometimes fear can make people so they don't even want to think about what they're afraid and they ignore it. They pretend it's not really there. Problem with problems is that they don't go away just because you ignore them. Let's continue. Whenever Irene talked in her sleep, I woke up immediately and stayed awake. I never could get used to this voice from a statue or a parrot, a voice that came out of dreams, not from a throat. Irene said that in my sleep, I flailed about enormously and shook the blankets off. That's a great quote right there. You know what? I'm going to put it in there just because it's so good. Irene said, consider the following quote. Irene said that in my sleep, I flailed about enormously and shook the blankets off. End of quote, no period. Then I put my parentheses and my page number. This is 41. Then I put my page, and then I put my period. Take a look at this quote. It's so fantastic when you're talking about fear affecting somebody negatively. Look at what it says. Irene said that in my sleep, I flailed about enormously and shook the blanket off. This clearly shows how scared the main character is because of his fear of what is taking over his house. His fear causes him extreme nightmares each night, where he shakes a lot and throws his blankets off due to his fear. Period. Look at that. This quote clearly shows how scared the main character is because of his fear of what is taking over his house. Remember, the whole question of this unit is, how does fear cause people to act negatively or have them do dumb things? This is a great quote. You might say, and I'm ready, fear causes people sometimes to not be able to sleep and even causes them nightmares. An excellent example of this can be seen in the following quote. Irene said that in my sleep, I flailed about enormously and shook the blankets off. Then this quote clearly shows how scared the main character is because of his fear. So right here, this is actually becoming like a paragraph of our future essay. Fantastic job. Let's continue. We had the living room between us, but at night you could hear everything in the house. We heard each other breathing, coughing, could even feel each other reaching for the light switch when, as happened frequently, neither of us could fall asleep. That's another great quote. As happened frequently, neither of us could fall asleep. Why? Too afraid to fall asleep. That's another great quote. I'm done with my notes for today. I have my 4, but if you have your 4 and you see even great ones, you know what? Put another quote down here. Right? Just put it down here because it's such a great quote. I'm going to write that down. As happened frequently, ... as happened frequently, comma, neither of us could fall asleep. Fall asleep. Here's another great quote. I'm going to put parentheses, close my quotations, then put this down as page number 41, right? And then I would give a note. This quote clearly shows how fear is negatively affecting the characters. Never pass up a good quote. Just because you already have 4, put down that 5th one because that might be the one you end up using in your essay. Let's continue. Aside from our nocturnal rumblings, everything was quiet in the house. During the day, where there were the household sounds, the metallic click of knitting needles, the rustle of stamp album pages turning. The oak door was massive. I think I said that. In the kitchen or the bath, which adjoined the part of the house that was taken over, that's a good quote, that part that was taken over, we managed to talk loudly, or Iran sang lullabies. That's interesting right there. When they're near the house part that's taken over, they talk very loudly or they sing. Why? They're not doing it to try to calm down what's on the other side. They're doing it, I think, so they don't hear it because hearing it makes them afraid. So they sing to keep themselves from not being so afraid. In the kitchen, there's always too much noise. The plates and glasses, for there to be interruptions from other sounds. We seldom allowed ourselves silence there. But when we went back to our rooms or the living room, then the house grew quiet. Look at that. We seldom allowed ourselves silence there. They made sure they always made noise over there because they didn't want to hear the noise on the other side of the house. It scared them so much. But when we went back to our rooms or the living room, then the house grew quiet, half lit. We ended up sticking around more slowly so as not to disturb one another. I think it was because of this that I woke up irremediably, and at once when Irene began to talk in her sleep. Except for the consequences, it's nearly a matter of repeating the same scene over again. I was thirsty that night. Okay, here's the night. Something's going to happen. And before we went to sleep, I told Irene that I was going to the kitchen for a glass of water. From the door of the bedroom, she was knitting. I heard the noise in the kitchen. If not the kitchen, then the bath. The passage off that angle dulled the sound. Irene noticed how brusquely I had paused and came up beside me without a word. So he notices that the sound is getting louder and closer. We stood listening to the noises, growing more and more sure that they were on our side of the oak door, not in the kitchen, the bath, or in the hall itself at the turn, almost next to us. Okay, so they're standing near it and they realize, oh no, these sounds are now not just on the other side of the door, they're now on our side. Watch. We didn't wait to look at one another. I took Irene's arm and forced her to run with me to the wrought iron door, not waiting to look back. You could hear the noises, still muffled but louder, just behind us. I'm going to ask you guys, have you ever had it where you're getting into bed at night and you're standing there in the dark and it feels like something might be underneath your bed and at any minute it's going to reach out and it's going to grab you? Or when you're running up some dark stairs from your basement, you can almost feel something grabbing you from behind and it's going to pull you down and it's going to eat you up or something crazy like that? He says it actually was behind them, and they do not turn around because they do not want to see what is behind them. Listen. Not waiting to look back, you could hear the noises, still muffled but louder, just behind us. I slammed the grating and we stopped in the vestibule. Now there was nothing to be heard. They've taken over our section, Irene said. The knitting had reeled off from her hands and the yarn ran back to the door and disappeared under it. When she saw that the balls of yarn were on the other side, she dropped the knitting without looking at it. Did you have time to bring anything? I asked hopelessly. No, nothing. We had what we had on. I remembered 15,000 pesos in the wardrobe in my bedroom. Too late now. I still had my wristwatch on and saw that it was 11 p.m. I took Irene around the waist. I think she was crying, and that was how we went into the street. Before we left, I felt terrible. I locked the front door up tight and tossed the key down the sewer. It wouldn't do to have some poor devil decide to go into house and rob the house at that hour and with the house taken over. Oh my God, they are so afraid of the house that they throw the keys down the sewer and they run away from their home and they left everything inside it. So what a heck of a note to show what fear can do to us. I'm going to get this down. I'm going to do another one before we left. Sorry. I felt terrible. Semicolon. I locked the front door up tight. I locked the front and tossed the key down the sewer. Holy cramoly. That's the end of my quote. So I don't put a period. I put quotation marks, right? And then I put my page number. This comes from page number 42. OMG. And then I put my period. And what does this quote clearly show? This quote clearly shows how terribly afraid the characters are. Period. They are so afraid, they leave all their stuff, all their belongings in the house and throw the keys to it down the sewer. In other words, they would rather be broke and homeless. Spell that right? Let's see. Homeless than spend another minute in their haunted house. Wow. That shows fear, seriously. So let's take a look at all our notes for today. Do I have a good 4 quotes about fear? 1 quote. The sound came through. Good. 2 quotes. I hurled myself against the door. 3rd quote. I had to shut the door. They've taken over the back part. 4th quote. She said I flailed about and was nervous in my sleep. 5th quote. Neither of us could fall asleep. 6th quote. We left the house alone forever. And one thing I want to do, I want to start these off with some quotes starters. Consider the following quote. Following, right? And quote, right? Haha. And then let's do the same thing here. So let's highlight, consider the following quote. Copy it. I'm going to put it before this quote as well. Consider the following quote. Perfect. Oh, let's put a colon as well. Make it more snazzy, more mature writing. Consider the following quote, colon, space, and then there's my quote, and then there's my my note, my annotation. Okay, we're done with house taken over. You should have at this point at least 8 annotated notes about fear affecting people negatively or making them do something stupid. Look at that last quote. How stupid is it that you would throw your keys down the sewer? Me, I'm calling Ghostbusters. I'm doing anything I can. This is my house. A lot of students would tell me they're not telling anybody. They're just selling the house and letting somebody buy a haunted house. Heck, these days in America, there's probably people who would want to buy a haunted house. There's so many of these crazy haunted house shows and whatnot. But again, this story definitely gave us examples of characters being affected by their fear and doing some dumb things as well because of their fear, locking off half of their house, throwing their house away. Literally, they threw their house away, the keys to the house. They said they're never going back into it. They left their money, their clothes, everything. That's insanely stupid, but that's what they did. So this is another great example of fear causing people to do very silly things or just affecting them negatively. Really fantastic job, everybody. Nice.